Hello, and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist, where we explore life's deepest secrets one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we're drifting together into some of history's most mysterious discoveries, real artifacts that archaeologists and scientists have held, studied, and puzzled over, and yet still leave us scratching our heads. Some seem far too advanced for the time they came from. Others whisper of lost knowledge, vanished civilizations, or technologies we can't quite replicate today. What if people of the past knew more than we give them credit for and left behind strange clues etched in stone, buried in caves, or locked inside objects we still don't understand? Even with satellites, supercomputers, and centuries of research, questions remain. Who built these things? Why do they exist? And how could something so ancient feel so out of place? Before we wander too far into the unknown, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment and tell me what time it is in your little corner of the world. And if these gentle rambles help you drift off to dreamland, please tap like and consider subscribing. It keeps this little snoozy corner of the internet alive and cozy, and it means the world to have you here. Now, fluff your pillow, take a slow, deep breath, and settle in. Let's begin. Not far from the quiet Greek island of Antikythera, beneath the rolling blue of the Aegean Sea, a shipwreck once slept silently for nearly 2,000 years. Hidden in the folds of coral and sand, it carried treasures from another time: amphorae, bronze statues, marble busts, all slowly being swallowed by the sea. But among those sunken relics, tangled in barnacles and broken wood, divers found something no one expected. Not a crown, not a sword, but gears, ancient, corroded, and packed together like a clock that had no business existing. What they had discovered was a mystery that would go on to baffle engineers, historians, and scientists for decades: a mechanical device now known as the Antikythera mechanism. At first glance, it looked like little more than a lump of greenish metal, cracked and eaten away by centuries underwater. But as researchers studied the fragments and pieced them back together, the shape of something remarkable began to emerge: a box no larger than a shoebox, filled with a dense network of finely crafted gears, dozens of them, some with teeth so small and precise they could rival modern machine parts, and carved into the outer casing were inscriptions, faint, ancient Greek letters that hinted at celestial movements and planetary paths. It wasn't just a machine, it was a mind frozen in metal, one that somehow knew how to track the motion of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and even follow the strange looping paths of the planets. As they turned the gears, scholars realized it acted like a cosmic calendar, showing the positions of celestial bodies on any given date, both past and future. With a few twists of a knob, you could look into the heavens, not with a telescope, but with cogs and dials, and yet it shouldn't have existed. The Antikythera mechanism has been dated to around 100 BCE, over 2,000 years ago, but the complexity of its design was so advanced it resembled the workings of 18th century clockwork, not something anyone expected from the ancient world. Historians had believed that mechanical astronomy didn't appear until the Renaissance. Suddenly, that timeline had to shift. This wasn't a fluke, it was a window into an entire tradition of engineering that we never knew existed or had forgotten. What's even more puzzling is that nothing like it was ever found again. No blueprints, no workshop ruins, no written manuals, just this one device, as if someone had built it, used it, and then vanished. It was as though a brilliant spark had briefly lit the ancient world and then gone out, leaving behind only questions. How did its creator know so much about the sky? How did they manage such precision with bronze tools? And why has no trace of this technology survived anywhere else? Over the years, Scientists have created replicas using 3D scans and digital modeling, trying to understand how the gears interacted. Every layer seems to reveal a new level of sophistication: lunar phases, eclipse predictions, even the timing of ancient Olympic games. But even now, not every function of the Antikythera mechanism is fully understood. Some gears seem to point to ideas or purposes that no one has quite figured out. It's the kind of object that rewrites not just what we know, but what we thought we could know. A machine from the ancient world that seems to whisper, "There's more to this story than you were told." And as we drift deeper into the mystery, we find that the Antikythera mechanism is only the beginning, because hidden in other corners of the world, buried beneath layers of time and dust, are more strange relics, each one with its own questions, each one just as hard to explain. Further inland, far from the sunken wrecks and salt stained machines of ancient seas, there rests a different kind of mystery, not forged in bronze or carved in stone, but inked softly on delicate parchment. It's a book no one can read, a book whose every page seems to murmur in a voice no one understands. The Voynich manuscript is not a relic of war, nor a tool of science, at least not in any way we've come to recognize. It sits quietly in a rare book library, bound in worn calfskin, its pages aged to a soft yellow. But inside, it tells a story that no one has ever been able to translate. The writing flows in elegant looping lines, about 170,000 characters in total, forming words, paragraphs, and full pages of text. But the language, it belongs to no known culture. It doesn't match Latin, Greek, Arabic, or any ancient or modern tongue. No one knows what alphabet it uses, or even if it's an alphabet at all. Linguists and code breakers have studied its structure, its grammar, its patterns. They've tried every cipher they can imagine. Still, it resists them, quiet and confident, as if it knows it's not meant to be understood just yet. And then there are the drawings, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Many pages are filled with strange, impossible plants, long stalks, looping vines, twisted roots, and blossoms that don't exist anywhere in the natural world. Some look like stretched versions of familiar herbs, while others are pure invention, like dreams remembered halfway. They're colored in soft greens, browns, and blues, hand painted with care, as if the illustrator believed they were recording something real. But nothing in any known botany book matches what's shown here. Beyond the plants, the pages shift into something even stranger. There are circular diagrams filled with radiating symbols, zodiac signs, and what appear to be astronomical wheels, but with arrangements and symbols that don't follow any known system. And nestled among these are drawings of women, naked figures, small and pale, floating in baths or pools, connected by tubes and channels that flow like rivers through the pages. Some pages resemble charts, others feel like recipes. Still others look like maps, but none of them say clearly what they're for. The manuscript was rediscovered in 1912 by a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich, buried in a trunk in an Italian monastery. But the book itself is older. Carbon dating puts the parchment around the early 1400s. That means it was written more than 100 years before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, at a time when Europe was still catching up with ancient knowledge from the Greeks and Arabs. Since then, the Voynich manuscript has passed through the hands of scholars, cryptographers, and even military code breakers. Some believed it was a hoax, an elaborate piece of nonsense. Others were convinced it held lost knowledge from an ancient or forgotten culture. Some even wondered if it was written in a language not from this earth. And yet, even now, after more than a century of study, no one has been able to say definitively what it is. The book speaks, that much is clear. It speaks in patterns, in symbols, in shapes that repeat just enough to suggest meaning. but the meaning itself stays just out of reach, like trying to read a dream with your eyes closed. It's as if someone long ago wrote something important and then left, taking the key with them. But not all messages from the past were written on pages. Some were carved in stone, vast, towering shapes arranged by hands long gone, standing in places where no writing had yet appeared, yet somehow still telling a story all their own. Somewhere in the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, far from any coast and surrounded by stretches of quiet farmland, a gentle mound once sat undisturbed for thousands of years. Covered in soil and stones, it looked like any other hill, ordinary, uneventful, easy to overlook. But what lay hidden beneath it would quietly change the way we think about human history. When archaeologists began digging in the 1990s, they expected to find something small, maybe an old village or a few scattered tools, but what they uncovered was something no one expected: massive stone pillars, arranged in circles, rising from the earth like the bones of an ancient cathedral. Each pillar was carefully shaped, some weighing as much as 20 tons, and many carved with detailed reliefs, animals, symbols, and abstract patterns that seem to speak though we don't know the language. This place is now known as Göbekli Tepe, and it's not just another archaeological site. It is the oldest known megalithic temple ever discovered, dating back to around 9600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. That's more than twice as old as the pyramids of Egypt. It was built at a time when humans were supposed to still be living in small mobile groups, hunters and gatherers without cities, without farming, and certainly without large scale architecture. But Göbekli Tepe tells a different story. The pillars are arranged in large circular formations, with two taller stones placed in the center, like a gateway or a focal point. Some of them show foxes, snakes, birds, and even abstract human like figures. There's a feeling that this space wasn't just for shelter or for work, it was for gathering, for ritual, for something deeply human. And that's what makes it so strange. At the time this temple was built, there were no signs of permanent agriculture in the region. No wheat fields, no towns, no pottery. That means people had to gather here from elsewhere, bringing with them the tools and the will to carve, lift, and position stones the size of trucks, all without the help of metal tools or wheels. Why would they go to such lengths? What was so important that they would build this massive place, long before villages or farms existed? Some researchers now believe that places like Göbekli Tepe came before civilization, not after, that perhaps it wasn't farming that led to temples, but temples that led to farming, that people gathered first to share stories, rituals, or ideas, and then slowly began to settle down to support that gathering. But even that idea is still just a theory. The deeper archaeologists dig, the more mysteries they find. There are many layers to the site, some of them buried intentionally, almost as if older circles were carefully sealed up before new ones were built. What were they trying to preserve or hide? And why, after hundreds of years of use, was the whole place eventually buried and forgotten? And then there's the question of the symbols, carvings of animals we know, shapes we don't. Some have pointed out the resemblance between certain reliefs and celestial alignments. Others suggest the site may have been used as a kind of calendar or a link between sky and earth. But the truth is, no one really knows. We only know that it wasn't supposed to be here, not this early, not this advanced, and not with this much purpose. Yet it stands, or rather, it rises again, slowly, as archaeologists continue to brush away the layers of time, one circle at a time, one pillar at a time. And buried in the silence of these stones is a feeling not of decay, but of intention, as if the people who built this place weren't just shaping rock, but protecting something they believed mattered more than anything else. Whatever that something was, it didn't vanish, it changed form, and in another ancient corner of the world, it may have taken the shape of something even more unexpected, not stone, but clay and metal. While Göbekli Tepe leaves us wondering how such monumental precision came before even the simplest written symbols, a far smaller object found thousands of miles away sparks a very different kind of curiosity, one not of stone, but of electricity. In the 1930s, during routine excavations near Baghdad, archaeologists unearthed a curious object. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple clay jar, the kind that once held oils, grains, or perfumes. But this jar wasn't empty. Inside it rested a tight fitting copper cylinder, and inside that, an iron rod. The pieces didn't seem remarkable on their own, but when assembled, they formed something strikingly similar to a modern battery. This discovery, now famously known as the Baghdad Battery, stirred a quiet storm in the archaeological world, not because of how it looked, but because of what it might have done. If the components had been sealed together with an acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, they could have generated a mild electric current. That's how many modern batteries work, by allowing electrons to flow between two different metals submerged in an electrolyte. And if this little jar was functioning as an electrochemical cell, then someone, nearly 2,000 years ago, may have discovered how to harness electricity long before it ever lit a bulb or sparked across wires. But why and how? There's no ancient user manual, no carving beside the jar that says insert lemon here. So scholars are left guessing. Some suggest it might have been used for electroplating, transferring a thin layer of metal, like gold or silver, onto another surface. Others wonder if it played a role in ritual or religious practices, perhaps creating a tingling sensation on the skin during ceremonies, adding a divine spark to the experience. A few even speculate it was purely accidental, just a quirky alignment of everyday materials that never served a real electrical purpose at all. Still, the resemblance is hard to ignore, and it's not just one battery. Several similar jars were found nearby, each with slight variations. It raises the question, was this an isolated experiment, or part of a broader tradition now lost to time? What makes the Baghdad battery so puzzling isn't just the object itself, but the silence surrounding it. No ancient texts describe its use. No workshops or instruction tablets have been discovered. If it really did produce electricity, the knowledge seems to have vanished without a trace, like a flicker of light in the dark, gone before anyone could see where it came from, and yet the implications ripple outward. If ancient civilizations toyed with electrical principles, even in crude or experimental ways, it suggests a kind of scientific curiosity we rarely associate with the ancient world, a reminder that progress isn't always linear, that discoveries can be made, forgotten, and made again centuries later with no memory of who held the secret first. The materials, clay, copper, iron, were common enough, but the idea behind combining them in just this way, that's something different. Whether it was an accident or the product of intention, it points toward minds that weren't just surviving, but experimenting, testing, wondering what might happen next. And this sense of layered mystery, of clues hiding inside everyday objects, continues to surface in other unexpected places. Deep in the frozen soil of Siberia, an even older enigma was waiting, not metal or clay this time, but carved wood, towering and ancient. It held on to symbols that no one alive can read. Symbols etched before the pyramids, before written history, and still they speak, even if we don't yet understand what they're trying to say. Deep beneath the Ural Mountains, in a stretch of boggy wilderness, where thick forests hide secrets older than any civilization, a team of gold prospectors stumbled onto something strange, not metal or stone, but wood, long, weathered, and carved. It was pulled from the dark waters of the Shigir peat bog in western Siberia, perfectly preserved in the oxygen starved layers of mud and moss that had kept it hidden for millennia. What they found that day in 1894 was later named the Shigir Idol, a towering wooden statue, originally over 17 feet tall, making it the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. But age alone isn't what makes the Shigir Idol so unsettling. It's what's carved into its surface. Every inch of the ancient larchwood is covered in mysterious geometric symbols, zigzags, chevrons, spirals, faces, and lines that seem deliberate, patterned, meaningful, but no one knows what they mean. And here's the twist: this isn't some medieval totem or even a Bronze Age monument. Carbon dating has revealed that the Shigir idol is nearly 12,000 years old. That places it in the Mesolithic period, a time when most humans were still roaming in small bands, hunting and gathering, long before writing, farming, or permanent cities had taken root, before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, even before the wheel. Yet here was a wooden statue, carved with tools and covered in a language, or maybe a code, that no one today can read. For a long time, the age of the idol was doubted. Early estimates placed it at a few thousand years old, at most. But repeated radiocarbon testing, including some of the most advanced modern methods, kept pushing the date further back. Not 5,000, not 8, but 12. What makes this discovery so eerie is how it disrupts our tidy timelines. We often imagine history as a neat ladder, from crude tools to simple farming to complex cities and writing. But the Shagir idol suggests that long before that ladder even existed, someone was already carving meaning into wood. They weren't just surviving, they were thinking symbolically, perhaps spiritually, maybe even scientifically. Researchers have debated what the markings could mean. Some believe they represent a map or a set of instructions. Others say it's an early myth carved into form, a cosmology, a tale of gods or ancestors. A few argue it could be an attempt to communicate with other tribes, or a visual memory system to pass down knowledge before language was written. The faces carved into the statue are particularly haunting: long, narrow, stylized. They stare straight ahead with blank eyes, like watchmen peering into a future they'll never see. Some archaeologists think they might represent spirits, ancestors, or guardians. Others wonder if there's something else entirely: symbols of status, or warning signs from a forgotten worldview. But no matter how many theories are proposed, the markings remain stubbornly silent. The statue itself wasn't found whole. It was unearthed in broken sections, damaged by time, water, and careless storage over the decades. But even in its fragmented form, it commands attention. Part of it now stands in a glass case in the Sverdlovsk Regional Museum in Yekaterinburg, Russia. A soft light glows over the darkened wood, casting long shadows that dance across the angular carvings, as if the idol is still trying to speak. What's perhaps most remarkable is that the tools used to carve it were likely made of stone, no metal, just sharpened rock against hardened larch. And yet the incisions are clean, sharp, and consistent, a feat of craftsmanship that required patience, vision, and purpose. Why would a small, ancient community living in a frozen Siberian landscape put so much time and effort into a towering wooden sculpture? Some believe it marked a sacred place. Others think it stood at the center of a now lost settlement. Maybe it was part of a ritual, maybe a monument to a forgotten event, or maybe something else entirely, something we don't yet have the mental tools to understand. It's as if the idol wasn't just made for that time, but for a time far beyond it. A message carved for the future, even if the language has been lost. And it's not the only relic to challenge our sense of what's possible. Thousands of miles away, in sun drenched ruins and jungles where ancient skulls gleam under museum lights, another class of artifacts stir questions just as perplexing. They shine like glass, reflect light like crystal, and yet hold secrets that can't be chipped away or drilled into. These are no ordinary bones, but human like skulls sculpted with impossible precision and no known tools. If the Shagir idol left us haunted with its ancient wooden symbols, then the next mystery stares back at us with even more chilling clarity, not from decaying timber, but from clear gleaming crystal, perfectly carved, eerily smooth, and uncannily lifelike. These are the crystal skulls of Mesoamerica, artifacts that continue to dazzle researchers, mystics, and skeptics alike. Unlike the Shigir idol, which was discovered by accident and almost discarded, many of these crystal skulls have surfaced through private collectors, museum donations, and antique dealers, their origins often vague or undocumented. Most are said to have come from regions tied to the ancient Aztec, Maya, or Mixtec civilizations. But strangely, despite these associations, no crystal skull has ever been found in a controlled archaeological dig. And yet they exist, dozens of them, some small and crude, others life sized, intricately detailed, and stunningly symmetrical. The most famous of all is the Mitchell Hedges skull, reportedly found in the 1920s in British Honduras, now Belize. This one isn't just carved from any crystal, it's sculpted from a single solid block of clear quartz. It weighs about 11 pounds and measures nearly identical to an actual human skull, complete with a detachable jawbone. But what makes it truly unnerving is what isn't there. No tool marks, no chisel scratches, no abrasions, no signs of how the quartz was cut, shaped, or polished. And this isn't a soft material. Quartz ranks 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, just below topaz and far above most common metals. To carve it today requires diamond tipped rotary tools, specialized equipment, and extremely delicate handling to avoid shattering the stone. And yet, this artifact, if truly pre Columbian, was supposedly crafted long before such tools existed. Scientists at Hewlett Packard once examined the Mitchell Hedges skull under intense scrutiny. They found that it had been carved against the natural grain of the quartz, a technique that even modern machines avoid because it dramatically increases the risk of cracking. That alone suggests either reckless chance or uncanny precision. So, how was it made? Who could have done it? And more intriguingly, why? Some believe these skulls served ceremonial purposes, that they were used in religious rites or as representations of death and rebirth. Others speculate that they were objects of power, connected to shamanic visions or spiritual communication. Then there are the more fringe theories that the skulls came from lost civilizations like Atlantis, or even from extraterrestrial visitors who gifted them to early humans as vessels of knowledge. And while mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical of such claims, even they admit the craftsmanship defies easy explanation. Beyond the Mitchell Hedges example, there's the Paris skull, housed in the Musée du Quai Branly, and the British Museum skull in London. Both exhibit incredibly detailed features, fine teeth, smooth domes, and anatomically accurate proportions, yet still lack any obvious evidence of carving techniques. The surfaces are impossibly smooth, like glass polished by time and intention. Even more puzzling is the lack of cultural context. For all their supposed Aztec or Mayan connections, there are no written records, glyphs, murals, or codices describing crystal skulls in those civilizations' archives. If they were so sacred or powerful, why no mention? It's like they appeared fully formed, mysterious outliers dropped into history without a trail. Theories range from the mechanical to the metaphysical. Some argue that the skulls were later forgeries created in the 19th century, perhaps using lapidary wheels. Others believe they might hold residual electromagnetic energy or encode vibrational frequencies meant to heal, transmit information, or connect to other realms. A few have claimed that gazing into them too long induces dreams, visions, even memories that don't belong to you. And yet, for all the debate, no two skulls are exactly alike. Each has unique features: cheekbones, jaw shapes, cranial ridges, as if they were modeled after specific individuals. But whose faces are they? Were these likenesses of ancient rulers, spiritual guides, or something else entirely? The longer one studies them, the more questions seem to emerge. Why would an ancient culture, lacking modern tools, choose one of the hardest, most brittle materials to represent the most fragile and symbolically loaded part of the human body, the skull? Why not clay, stone, wood? Why quartz, with its piezoelectric properties, its ability to store and emit small electric charges under pressure? Some believe the answer lies not just in what they are, but what they're meant to become when activated, as if they're pieces of a larger puzzle, inert until understood. And perhaps that understanding isn't just about craftsmanship, but about connection, a message meant for the future, not carved in language, but in geometry, reflection, and resonance. From smooth crystal silence, we shift to lines inked across ancient parchment, but these lines form no words we know, and the language, if it is one, remains as mysterious as the faces carved in quartz. While the crystal skulls offer a silent, glimmering mystery, carved from stone and sealed in silence, the next artifact whispers in ink. Faded lines on weathered parchment, curves and coastlines sketched by a steady hand over 500 years ago. Not carved from quartz, but drawn from memory, experience, or perhaps something stranger. This is the Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, who claimed to have used older source maps, some now lost, to piece together this intriguing nautical chart. The map itself is only a fragment of what was once a larger world map, but what remains is enough to spark one of the most baffling cartographic mysteries in history. Let's start with what's known. The surviving portion of the map focuses on the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and a section of the Antarctic coastline, or at least something that resembles it. What's odd isn't just the inclusion of land so far south, it's how that land is drawn. The landmass, situated at the bottom of the map, appears to depict Queen Maud Land, a region of Antarctica, but it shows this area without its thick covering of ice. Detailed bays, inlets, and mountain ranges appear, features that are today buried beneath miles of glacial ice. According to modern science, this part of Antarctica has been frozen solid for thousands of years. Yet here it is, rendered with uncanny accuracy, centuries before the continent was officially discovered, and long before modern imaging could reveal what lies below the ice. How could a 16th century admiral possibly map a region hidden from human eyes? Piri Reis himself, in notes scrawled along the margins of the map, said he compiled it using maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great and others from unknown mariners. If this is true, it suggests that someone, long before the Renaissance, possessed detailed knowledge of global geography, including places they supposedly could not have reached. Some scholars believe these source maps may have come from lost ancient civilizations, perhaps seafarers who traveled further than we think. Others propose that advanced cultures once mapped the globe and passed fragments of this knowledge down through time. Still others argue the resemblance to Antarctica is coincidence, or that the drawing was misinterpreted. But if it is just a coincidence, it's a startlingly precise one. And the mystery doesn't stop at Antarctica. The coasts of South America on the Piri Reis map curve farther east than they should, almost as if they were based on a projection that only makes sense when viewed from above, from space. It's as though the cartographer had access to a globe or satellite perspective, not just a flat surface, long before such views were even imagined. Then there's the accuracy of longitude. Determining longitude requires precise timekeeping, something that wasn't reliably possible until the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century. Yet the Piri Reis map manages to align coastlines in a way that suggests remarkable longitudinal knowledge for its time. How? Could the map's mysterious sources have had a method for calculating longitude that we've lost or overlooked? The parchment itself, held today in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul, has been studied by historians, cartographers, and geologists alike. Many agree. It's real, it's old, and it's unlike anything else from its era. What remains disputed is how it came to be. Some theorists suggest a global seafaring civilization may have existed before the last ice age, mapping the world while sea levels were lower and coastlines were different. When the ice returned, so did the mystery, and only fragments like this remained, tucked away in ancient texts and copied over generations. Others go further, proposing that the map is evidence of contact with visitors, either survivors of an earlier, advanced culture or something not of this earth at all. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the Piri Reis map doesn't behave like a typical 16th century chart. It raises questions about human memory, ancient knowledge, and how much we really understand about our own history. Is it a leftover page from a forgotten library, a clue in a much older puzzle we've barely begun to piece together? And just when you think the mysteries couldn't get more tangled, the next artifact emerges not as ink on paper, but as a carved lid in stone, a heavy slab covering a tomb whose image seems to leap from the past straight into the stars. From the faded ink of ancient maps, we now descend beneath the surface, not into oceans or caves, but deep into the jungles of southern Mexico. There, buried beneath the thick canopy and wrapped in the humid stillness of time, stands the city of Palenque, once a vibrant hub of Mayan civilization. And at its heart lies the Temple of the Inscriptions, a pyramid that doesn't just rise from the earth, it also reaches, strangely, toward the sky. Beneath this temple, in a crypt sealed for over 1,000 years, archaeologists discovered the tomb of King Pakal the Great, a ruler whose reign began in childhood and stretched for nearly 70 years. But it wasn't the jewels or the bones or even the age of the chamber that stirred the world's imagination. It was the lid of his sarcophagus, a massive stone slab, carefully carved, heavy as a small car, that ignited endless curiosity. Because when you first look at it, it doesn't quite resemble anything typical of Mayan art. It shows King Pakal lying horizontally, seemingly suspended in midair. His body appears arched, his arms extended, his feet hovering above strange shapes, almost like petals. Around him swirl detailed symmetrical patterns, what some interpret as flames, exhaust, or even a kind of cockpit. There are elements that resemble tubes, levers, a nose cone, and what looks to modern eyes like a jet intake or rocket engine beneath his feet. To many viewers, especially when viewed through a modern lens, it looks like Pakal is piloting a spacecraft. This interpretation was catapulted into pop culture by Swiss author Erich von Däniken, who featured the image in his 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods. He argued that the carving wasn't just symbolic, it was literal. He believed the Mayans had contact with advanced beings, perhaps even extraterrestrial visitors, and Pakal's tomb was visual proof. The stone slab in this view doesn't represent a journey to the underworld, but a launch into the heavens. Of course, archaeologists and Mayan scholars offer a very different explanation. They describe the image as a rich tapestry of Mayan mythology, one rooted in the spiritual beliefs of death and rebirth. According to their interpretation, Pakal is falling into the jaws of the underworld, or perhaps rising into the world tree, a sacred symbol in Mayan cosmology that connects the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. The strange elements aren't levers or nozzles, but depictions of celestial bands, stylized glyphs, and serpent imagery, often used to represent transition between realms. And yet, the shape still stirs something. Maybe it's just a trick of modern perspective. Our eyes, trained on machines and flight and the International Space Station, are wired to see engines and capsules. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's something more, a cultural echo, a story that mirrors other ancient depictions across the world of gods descending from the sky, or mortals ascending to meet them. Some wonder why the Mayans, a people known for their precise calendars and deep astronomical knowledge, would craft such a powerful, technical looking image purely for metaphor. Others note that the sarcophagus lid doesn't stand alone, that across Mesoamerica you'll find carvings of winged serpents, deities wearing helmet like headgear, and symbols that seem to reflect an obsession with the stars. Was it all spiritual or observational? Were they imagining divine journeys or witnessing something unusual? And then there's the craftsmanship itself. The lid weighs several tons and was carved with incredible precision. The details are sharp and balanced, and every curve seems intentional. It took great effort to lower it into the crypt and centuries for the jungle to hide it again. What adds another strange layer is that this stone image lay undisturbed, in total darkness, for over 1,000 years, until it was finally uncovered in 1952 by Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz Luye. The moment the chamber was opened and light fell on the image again, the world was forced to ask new questions, ones that still haven't been fully answered. And just as one mystery is unearthed, another opens not beneath the soil, but deep within it. Vast chambers carved with superhuman effort, without explanation, and without even a whisper of who made them or why. If Pakal's tomb invites us to gaze upward, to the stars, to myths of flight and otherworldly journeys, then what lies beneath the surface in eastern China pulls us just as powerfully downward, not into caves shaped by nature over millennia, but into something altogether more baffling, the Longyu Caves, a vast man made network so precise, so ambitious, that even today it defies easy explanation. Tucked away in Zhejiang province, near the village of Xi'an Beichun, the Longyu Caves were unknown to the world until 1992. Not because they were hidden in remote wilderness or sealed by time, but because they had simply become forgotten. For generations, the locals thought the deep, still pools scattered across the landscape were bottomless ponds. Stories warned against falling into them. You'd never be seen again. But one day, a curious villager decided to test the tale. He and a few friends rented a water pump expecting to uncover little more than mud and stone. What drained out instead was history itself. As the water lowered, what emerged was something no one had anticipated: a massive rectangular underground chamber, complete with smooth walls, tall ceilings, and sharp corners. It looked carved, not by chance, not by erosion, but by intent. And that was just the beginning. Over time, at least 24 individual caves were uncovered, each one distinct, yet following a common blueprint. The chambers are enormous, some over 100 feet deep, large enough to hold entire buildings. Every surface is marked by uniform chisel lines, running in perfect parallel, almost as if the walls had been engraved with a giant comb. There are columns left behind for structural support, smooth stairs leading downward, and intricately carved beams that suggest careful architectural planning. Yet here's the mystery: there are no historical records of these caves ever being built. No ancient text, no legend, not even a whisper. China is known for meticulous historical documentation, especially during dynasties where major projects, roads, canals, tombs were carefully recorded. But the Longyu Caves, they're completely absent from the archives. No dynasty claims them, no emperor commissioned them. It's as if an entire society once knew they existed and then chose to forget. Archaeologists estimate that over 1 million cubic meters of stone would have had to be removed to create these chambers. That's equivalent to 4,000 modern swimming pools. And yet, there's no sign of discarded rock, no quarries nearby, no evidence of where the material was taken or how it was moved. Even the chisel marks raise questions. The consistency is remarkable, suggesting either a large, highly trained workforce using synchronized technique or a technology we don't understand. Some have proposed rudimentary pulleys and scaffolds. Others wonder about lost tools or methods passed down through oral traditions that were eventually lost. One of the most haunting details is how the caves seem to have been designed with acoustics in mind. Sounds travel oddly in certain chambers, bouncing, echoing, sometimes amplifying in a way that seems intentional. A whispered word in one corner can be heard clearly across the room. Could these have been ceremonial spaces, places of worship, secret meeting halls, or were they meant for something entirely different? Perhaps water storage, shelter, or even an ancient experiment in resonance. Adding to the puzzle, each cave is unique. Though similar in size and structure, none are carbon copies. It's as if each one was assigned to a different architect, given a shared vision, but allowed their own interpretation. Some contain small niches or platforms, others wider spaces or deeper columns, but none appear unfinished. They all feel complete, and yet not a single tool has been found inside. No chisels, no hammers, no lamps or torches, no signs of habitation. It's as if the workers vanished the moment the caves were done, leaving behind only the hollow spaces and their perfect repeating grooves. What culture would devote so much effort to shaping the earth, only to leave no signature, no monument, no story? And what other secrets might lie hidden beneath our feet, waiting like the Longyu Caves for a curious villager and a borrowed water pump to bring them back into the light? Because not far from here, along a cold river and drawn in ink centuries ago, another mystery was sketched into existence, one that may show lands long before they were ever known, and coastlines that should have been covered in ice. If the Longyu Caves invite us to imagine ancient engineers carving perfect shapes in darkness, the Ulfbert swords ask us to step into the glow of fire-lit forges, where sparks fly, steel melts, and blades are born with secrets forged into their very core. These weapons were no ordinary tools of war. They carried a name that whispered through Europe like a myth, Ulfbert, etched into the blade near the hilt, often in bold forward facing letters ULF BRH plus T. The signature alone made a warrior's enemies hesitate, because to hold an Ulfbert sword was to wield something nearly supernatural for its time. They began appearing in the hands of Viking and Frankish warriors around the 9th century, and the blade stood out immediately. Unlike most medieval weapons, which were brittle, heavy, and often full of impurities, the Ulfbert swords were astonishingly strong, flexible, and incredibly pure. Their steel contained very little slag, the leftover waste from smelting, and instead had a remarkably high carbon content, similar to modern industrial steel. To put that in perspective, Europe wouldn't develop steel of similar quality until nearly 1,000 years later, during the Industrial Revolution. This raises a question so sharp it cuts deeper than the blades themselves. How did medieval blacksmiths create technology centuries ahead of their time? The secret lies in the process of making steel. Normal medieval furnaces simply couldn't reach the temperatures needed to remove enough impurities and introduce sufficient carbon to create such refined metal. That process, called crucible steelmaking, was believed to have only existed in places like India and Persia at the time, where artisans had developed complex techniques for producing ultra strong steel, like Wetzes. And yet, here in the damp forests and cold stone castles of northern Europe, someone was producing blades that rivaled, or perhaps even surpassed, those Eastern traditions. To make things stranger, not all Ulfbert swords are equal. Over 170 swords have been found, bearing some variation of the Ulfbert name. But metallurgical tests show that many of them were forgeries, poor imitations of the original. These fakes had lower quality iron, more slag, and were prone to breakage. Some even had misspelled inscriptions, like plus Ulfbert HT, with reversed letters or missing crosses. It seems the name itself became a brand, a mark of unmatched quality, and like any valuable brand, it was copied, counterfeited, and mass produced by smiths trying to cash in on the legend. But the true Ulfbert swords, the few made from that incredibly pure steel, stand apart. They cut through armor, bone, and battlefield myths alike. Some experts believe they were made using imported materials, with raw iron perhaps shipped from the East or traded along the Silk Road or Volga trade routes. Others suggest a small group of elite blacksmiths, possibly tied to monastic orders, held forgotten knowledge passed down through generations. One theory even proposes that the knowledge may have come from captured Eastern craftsmen brought to Europe through conquest or trade, who shared their techniques in secret. But the truth remains buried, just like the swords themselves, discovered in rivers, graves, and the ruins of battlefields, silent but enduring. Each Ulfbert blade carries a tension within it, not just of metal and carbon, but of time and mystery. They slice through what we thought we knew about medieval technology, raising questions that make us reconsider the flow of ideas, tools, and knowledge through ancient civilizations. And just as these weapons challenge our assumptions about European metallurgy, another mystery quietly echoes from stone walls deep below the earth, where voices might have once danced in the dark, and sound itself may have held sacred meaning. If the Ulfbert sword showed how ancient hands mastered metal with unbelievable precision, then the hypogeum of Halsaflieni reveals something even more curious, that ancient minds may have known how to shape sound itself. Tucked away beneath the small island of Malta, the hypogeum isn't just old, it's ancient. carved over 5,000 years ago, long before the Great Pyramid rose in Egypt. This underground structure was never built above ground and then buried. Instead, it was excavated directly into the rock, 3 stories deep, room by room, chamber by chamber, as if the builders knew exactly where each hallway and hollow should go without ever seeing it from above. No natural light reaches these stone corridors. Everything that happens down there, every whisper, footstep, or breath, is swallowed by the earth. But in one room, something extraordinary happens. It's called the Oracle Chamber. Inside this space, the stone walls curve gently inward, wrapping around a single standing stone seat. And if someone speaks while standing there, especially in a deep male voice, the sound amplifies, echoes, and reverberates in a strange, almost hypnotic way. The acoustics aren't just loud, they're resonant, almost otherworldly. Tones in the 110 Hz frequency, when spoken from the oracle seat, can be heard vibrating throughout the entire temple complex. But it doesn't stop there. But modern scientists have discovered that this specific frequency doesn't just affect sound, it affects the human brain. Studies have shown that extended exposure to 110 Hz can influence activity in the prefrontal cortex, altering mood, triggering emotional shifts, and even sparking trance like states. It can quiet overthinking, stir up vivid imagery, and create sensations of floating or timelessness, even when the listener is fully awake. In a way, the oracle room doesn't just carry sound, it carries experience, a sonic environment built not just to hear, but to feel. And this was designed thousands of years before microphones, echo chambers, or frequency charts. Was it luck, coincidence, or could the ancient builders have understood, through experience or intuition, that certain sounds could shift human awareness? The temple itself was more than just a place of sound. Its walls are etched with spirals, circles, and red ochre patterns, suggesting rituals or symbols of life, death, and rebirth. Thousands of human bones were discovered in its upper chambers, some stacked, others arranged. Many of the skulls showed signs of elongation, not the kind caused by disease, but deliberate shaping, possibly for spiritual or ceremonial reasons. Was the hypogeum a tomb, a temple, a healing space, or something we don't even have words for yet? There are no written records, no inscriptions left behind to explain the purpose of the chambers. And yet, walking its corridors, it's easy to imagine torchlight flickering on damp stone, chants rising into the cavern air, and deep, resonant voices echoing in patterns meant to unlock something inside the people gathered there. What makes the hypogeum even more mysterious is how carefully it was hidden. For centuries, the entire structure lay completely forgotten, buried beneath an ordinary neighborhood in Malta. It wasn't rediscovered until 1902, when a construction project accidentally broke through the roof of one of the upper chambers. Imagine being that worker, tapping into the ceiling of an ancient, echoing void that hadn't heard a human voice in thousands of years. And once inside, archaeologists noticed something else. The way sound moved through the temple wasn't random. Rooms were placed so that voices could carry or be blocked depending on where you stood. The acoustic design seemed deliberate, as if the builders sculpted silence and vibration with the same care they gave to stone. Even today, the hypogeum is so acoustically sensitive that only a small number of visitors are allowed in at a time. Too much noise, and the delicate structure begins to shift. Too many footsteps, and the floor begins to crumble. It's almost as if the site was never meant to be crowded, as if the rituals inside were personal, precise, and tuned to small gatherings where every word, every sound, and every silence mattered. And while most ancient mysteries are buried under sand or sealed behind stone, this one breathes an echo and frequency, humming softly beneath the earth like a forgotten song. And just like a melody fading into the dark, another voice from the past begins to rise, this time from a land where metal never rusts, and time itself seems to pause in the shadow of a pillar that refuses to decay. And just as echoes in the hypogeum whispered of voices from long ago, the iron pillar of Delhi stands tall in the sunlight, silent but unyielding, as if time itself forgot how to touch it. Rising over 23 feet into the warm Indian air, this unassuming metal column doesn't sparkle, doesn't shine, but it does something far more remarkable. It refuses to rust. Despite being over 1,600 years old, exposed to the elements, monsoon rains, sweltering summers, and thick urban air, the pillar still stands almost untouched by corrosion. In a world where even the finest modern steel rusts eventually, this iron quietly challenges everything we thought we knew about metallurgy. Historians believe it was erected during the Gupta Empire, around the 4th or 5th century CE, possibly as a tribute to a king or a deity. It now stands in the Kupt complex of Delhi, surrounded by the ruins of ancient temples and the later additions of Islamic architecture. Visitors walk past it every day, many unaware that they are standing before one of the great metallurgical mysteries of the ancient world. The surface of the pillar is smooth, cool, and dark, not gleaming, but not crumbling either. And scientists who've studied it up close have noticed something extraordinary. Instead of forming flaky red rust like modern iron, the pillar has developed a thin, protective layer known as misawite, a mix of iron, oxygen, and hydrogen that somehow shields the entire column like a natural armor. This protective film formed slowly over centuries and doesn't allow moisture or oxygen to penetrate further into the metal. But what's even more curious is that this layer formed without modern tools, without stainless steel, and without the kinds of advanced chemical treatments we use today. How did they do it? Some researchers suggest that the ancient blacksmiths may have unknowingly used a unique mix of high phosphorus content, low sulfur, and minimal carbon in their iron. Combined with India's specific climate conditions, alternating wet and dry, this might have allowed the pillar to grow its self protecting skin naturally over time. But even this explanation doesn't fully satisfy everyone, because many other ancient iron objects, forged under similar conditions, have rusted away completely. It seems as though the creators of this pillar weren't just lucky, they knew something or did something that modern metallurgists still haven't been able to replicate on this scale. The craftsmanship goes beyond rust resistance, too. The entire pillar is welded seamlessly. There are no clear joins or breaks, meaning the massive iron shaft was likely forged in layers and hammered together with astonishing skill and consistency, a feat difficult even with today's machines. Legends swirl around it. Of course, some say the pillar was blessed by the gods. Others whisper that it marks the navel of the world, or hides beneath it an ancient weapon that can only be triggered if the pillar is moved. In fact, there's even a story about a time when people believed that wrapping their arms around the pillar and making a wish would bring good luck, until too many visitors started damaging its base, and the practice was eventually banned. But perhaps the most haunting part of the pillar's story is how it seems to quietly watch the centuries go by. Empires rose and fell around it. Armies marched, temples burned, dynasties changed, and yet the pillar remained. Not as a relic forgotten in a museum, but standing proudly outdoors, fully exposed to everything nature and history could throw at it. It doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't need to. Its very existence whispers a question. What if ancient metallurgists knew something we've overlooked? And if they could shape metal in such a way that it endures through the centuries, what else might they have crafted? Lost to time, buried in soil, or mistaken for something ordinary? Perhaps the answer lies not just in the tools they used, but in the mindset they had. A deeper patience, a different rhythm, a relationship with materials that went beyond formulas and measurements, one that involved intuition, ritual, and maybe even a touch of reverence. From the cool shade of this silent column, we now descend again, this time into a place where cities were built beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from the sun and carved into the rock like a blueprint no one wrote down. And just beyond the silent endurance of that rustless pillar, the earth itself opens up, not with thunder or fire, but with quiet mystery. Because in central Turkey, beneath the dust and dry wind of Cappadocia, there's a city not built upon the land, but carved beneath it. Derinkuyu. From the surface, you'd never suspect what lies below. A small sleepy village of stone houses, a few hills, trees swaying gently in the breeze, but underneath it all is a hidden world, a sprawling multi-level underground city dug deep into the volcanic rock. Not just tunnels or caves, but an entire living system, homes, stables, schools, kitchens, wine presses, even chapels, all below ground. And somehow it was all done without blueprints, without writing, without even leaving a proper record of who made it or why. Derinkuyu descends more than 280 feet into the earth, with at least 18 levels, though only a portion is accessible to visitors today. Each level is connected by narrow passageways just wide enough for one person to squeeze through, often requiring people to stoop, shuffle sideways, or descend steep steps with only a flickering light for guidance. And yet, despite the confined spaces, the air never feels suffocating. That's because the entire city was ventilated with vertical shafts, some extending all the way from the surface to the lowest chambers. There are over 50 of them, cleverly placed so that fresh air circulates throughout the system naturally. No fans, no electricity, just physics and brilliant design. The deeper you go, the more the complexity reveals itself. There were rolling stone doors at key points, massive circular slabs that could be rolled into place to block off certain passages, like a prehistoric security system. These weren't for decoration. They could be used to seal off entire sections of the city during invasions, protecting the people inside. And who were those people? That's the mystery. No single culture claims clear ownership. There are no builder's signatures, no tablets or carvings telling their story. Historians guess it may have been started by the Phrygians, or perhaps expanded by early Byzantine Christians fleeing persecution. Others think the Hittites carved the first levels thousands of years earlier. The truth is, nobody knows for certain. The architecture itself is full of questions. How did ancient people, with simple tools, manage to carve out so much space, millions of cubic feet of rock, without collapsing the structure or running out of air? Some rooms are so large they could hold entire gatherings. Others are tiny nooks for sleeping or storage. Every space feels deliberate, planned, almost modern in its functionality. And this wasn't just for a few dozen people. Derinkuyu could support over 20,000 residents, complete with food storage and water wells that reached deep into underground aquifers. There were even cattle pens and grain silos, all hidden beneath the surface. Imagine an entire town, families, animals, teachers, priests, all living underground for weeks or months at a time. But why? Some think it was a refuge, a place to hide from marauding armies, religious persecution, or even natural disasters. Others believe it was a way to escape the harsh Anatolian winters, or to store food safely away from the elements. And then there are those who suggest something even older, that Derinkuyu wasn't just a shelter, but part of an ancient network of underground cities, all connected like veins running beneath the land, their true purpose long forgotten. In fact, Derinkuyu isn't alone. Dozens of similar underground cities have been discovered across the Cappadocian region. Many are smaller, some barely excavated, and others still sealed off. But Derinkuyu remains the largest and the most astonishing. Its rediscovery is as strange as the city itself. In 1963, a local man knocked down a wall in his basement, only to reveal a dark passageway that seemed to go on forever. He followed it, step by step, torch in hand, until he realized he wasn't just in an old cellar, he was standing at the edge of a forgotten civilization. Since then, Derinkuyu has become a source of fascination for archaeologists, architects, and travelers alike. Not because of treasure or ornate carvings, there are none, but because of the impossible planning that went into every tunnel, chamber, and corridor. It makes you wonder what other entire worlds might still be hidden beneath our feet. And just as one begins to feel the weight of so much forgotten space carved deep into the bones of the earth, we surface again, only to find that on another continent, another set of stones were cut with such eerie perfection that even modern blades would hesitate to follow their seams. From a hidden city carved into the ground, we now rise high into the thin air of the Andes. In the highlands of Peru, just above the ancient city of Cusco, massive stone walls stretch across the mountain like sleeping giants, silent, still, but clearly shaped by human hands. Sacsayhuaman. Its name sounds like a whisper in the wind, and its presence feels like a puzzle carved in stone. Towering zigzag walls, some stretching hundreds of feet, made not from bricks or blocks, but from enormous boulders, some as tall as a house and weighing more than 100 tons. Yet they sit so closely together that you can't even slip a razor blade between them. Each stone has been cut, shaped, and fit into its neighbors like a massive 3D jigsaw puzzle, not in uniform shapes, but in wild, complex angles, no two pieces alike. And yet they all lock perfectly into place, without mortar, without filler, just stone on stone. The edges are so smooth, it's hard to believe they weren't carved by machines. But Sacsayhuaman is ancient, built long before cranes, before concrete, before modern tools even existed. So, how did they do it? That's the question that's left engineers, architects, and archaeologists baffled for decades. The common explanation credits the Inca civilization, known for their advanced building techniques and love of stonework. But Sacsayhuaman seems to go beyond even their skill. Some of these stones are so massive that even with modern equipment, lifting and fitting them would be a challenge. And the terrain makes it even harder. The site sits over 12,000 feet above sea level on rugged, sloped ground. Moving stones of that size across mountains would be difficult even today. Yet whoever built Sacsayhuaman not only moved them, they shaped them with surgical precision and stacked them into walls that have stood firm for centuries, resisting earthquakes that crumbled buildings in nearby cities. Even stranger, the joints between the stones aren't simple straight lines. Many follow curved, zigzag, or interlocking patterns, as if the builders wanted to make the stones fit together like pieces of a living sculpture. This design not only adds beauty, it also provides strength. The walls absorb shock and movement, flexing slightly during tremors and snapping back into place. It's a form of seismic architecture, and it works so well that some researchers believe the builders understood earthquake dynamics better than many modern engineers. But there's more than just walls here. For walk the grounds and you'll find terraces, tunnels, and carved stone thrones. There are water channels and ceremonial platforms, and even strange spiral shaped carvings that seem to serve no obvious purpose. Some researchers believe Sacsayhuaman was more than a fortress. It may have been a spiritual center, a gathering place for rituals, or even a celestial observatory. From the air, some say the site looks like the head of a giant puma, with the zigzag walls forming its teeth, aligning with the ancient layout of Cusco, which was shaped like the body. Whether coincidence or not, it shows how deeply the builders thought about form and function, art and meaning. Yet, despite its scale and mystery, we still don't know how it was done. There are no detailed records from the time of its construction. Spanish conquistadors arriving in the 16th century were stunned by its size and strength and even tried to tear it down. Some stones were taken, but most were too large to move. The walls held firm, as if anchored to the mountain itself. And then there are the legends. Local oral traditions tell of giants who helped shape the stones, or ancient civilizations that possessed lost knowledge, ways of softening stone, levitating mass, or channeling the earth's energies. While no physical evidence supports these stories, they persist, passed down generation to generation as the stones remain unmoved. Even with modern laser scanners and 3D models, no one has been able to fully replicate the technique used to build Sacsayhuaman. Some believe it involved patient carving and endless trial and error. Others think there must have been some forgotten tool or method, a secret lost to time. And while the stones tell no tales, they keep their place, silent and unmoved, as though waiting for us to understand. From here, we travel even farther back in time, not to a fortress, but to a small wooden figure carved thousands of years before writing, before empires, before memory, and still speaking in symbols we have yet to translate. Not all ancient puzzles are carved from stone or cast in metal. Some are far more fragile, made of wood, tucked away in tombs and nearly overlooked. In a dusty Egyptian storeroom, amid rows of statues and burial goods, a small carved object was catalogued without much fanfare. It was labeled as a simple bird figurine, unremarkable at first glance. But decades later, someone looked closer. The sakura bird, as it's now known, is only about 7 inches long. Carved from sycamore wood, it has a smooth, curved body, outstretched wings, and a vertical tail, and it looks less like a bird and more like a glider. In fact, to the eyes of modern engineers and aviation experts, it resembles an early model airplane more than any known bird. It was discovered in 1898 in a tomb at the Saqqara necropolis just outside of Cairo, among the burial relics of a high ranking official from around 200 BCE. For many years, it sat largely ignored. But then, in the 1960s, an aeronautical engineer named Khalil Masiha studied it carefully. He noticed something strange. The design lacked the usual features of bird statues from that period. No feet, no feathers, no details that would suggest it was simply decorative. Instead, it had streamlined wings, a tail fin, and a balance of proportions remarkably similar to modern aircraft. He proposed a controversial theory. What if the Saqqara bird wasn't symbolic at all? What if it was a scale model, a test piece of a glider? To explore the idea, replicas were built based on the bird's exact dimensions. When placed in a wind tunnel, They didn't just float, they glided. With a small vertical stabilizer, added something possibly missing from the original due to damage or age, the model flew even better. Its aerodynamic design seemed more than just coincidence. This sparked a wave of speculation. Could the ancient Egyptians have understood basic principles of flight? Could they have experimented with airborne designs, not powered flight as we know it, but perhaps simple gliders launched from temple roofs or desert cliffs? If so, why aren't there more artifacts like this? Mainstream archaeologists remain cautious. Most say the bird is likely symbolic, part of the many winged motifs found in Egyptian religion and burial practices. Birds often represented the soul or divine messengers. The vertical tail might simply have been a stylized stand, and the aerodynamic resemblance, they argue, could be nothing more than accidental symmetry, the product of artistic expression rather than scientific intent. But others aren't so sure. Some point to ancient Egyptian legends, like those of Thoth, the god of knowledge, who was sometimes said to have the secrets of the sky, or stories of flying machines in the temple texts, written in metaphor perhaps, but hinting at lost knowledge. The Sakura bird might not have been a vehicle, they suggest, but a representation of something real, something once known, now forgotten. There's also the question of how advanced ancient Egyptian engineering really was. These were the same people who aligned pyramids with starlight, who constructed temples with precise acoustic properties, who mastered medicine, math, and materials. Could their curiosity have reached the skies as well? And yet, this is the only known object of its kind. No blueprints, no documentation, no second or third prototypes, just a single carved bird with a mysterious shape, found in a sealed tomb. Is it a toy, a ritual object, or a fragment of forgotten experimentation? The wood doesn't offer answers. It's silent, like so many artifacts we've dug from the ground, brushed off and stared at in wonder. But it does stir something, because while massive stone monuments tell us about power and permanence, it's these small, odd objects that whisper something more human, a curiosity, a spark, a question we weren't expecting to ask. And as we leave Egypt's tombs and glide forward in time, we find ourselves looking not at wings, but at shapes, perfect circles, impossibly smooth, scattered across Europe like messages without words, crafted with care, made of metal, and still refusing to give up their purpose. The next puzzle lies in bronze, with 12 sides, no instructions, and nothing else like them in the ancient world. From a carved wooden glider that might have caught the wind in ancient Egypt, we shift now to something that listens to the earth itself, not with ears or eyes, but with a kind of quiet mechanical intuition. Long before digital sensors or seismic graphs, there was a man in China who built something remarkable, a bronze vessel that could detect the trembling of the ground, even from hundreds of miles away. His name was Zhang Heng, a polymath, astronomer, mathematician, and inventor during the Eastern Han Dynasty, around the year 13 Tor CE. In an age without electronics or satellites, Zhang Heng created one of the earliest known seismographs, an earthquake detector that didn't just feel tremors, it could tell you which direction the quake had come from. The device, known as Hufeng Didong Yi, literally instrument for measuring seasonal winds and the movements of the earth, looked more like an ornate vase than a scientific tool. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, it was made of bronze and hollow inside. Around its outer surface were 8 dragon heads, spaced evenly to point toward each of the cardinal and intercardinal directions, north, northeast, east, and so on. Beneath each dragon's mouth sat a bronze toad, its mouth open, waiting. Inside the vessel was a delicate pendulum mechanism. When an earthquake struck, even from far away, the internal device would shift in just the right way to activate one specific dragon head. That dragon would drop a small metal ball from its mouth. The ball would fall into the toad's mouth below, making a distinct clink sound. To those nearby, the sound would mean more than just a ball falling. It meant the earth had moved, and more impressively, the direction the ball had fallen revealed where the tremor had come from. Historical records say the seismoscope once detected an earthquake more than 300 miles away, even though no one nearby had felt anything unusual at the time. Days later, messengers arrived from the west, reporting the earthquake just as Zhang Heng's machine had signaled. For many, this confirmed the device wasn't just decorative or theoretical, it worked. How exactly it worked, though, remains a puzzle even today. Modern attempts to recreate the instrument using ancient materials and the physics available at the time have come close, but still can't fully replicate the elegance of the original. Some theorize the internal pendulum may have been suspended and carefully balanced to shift with subtle seismic waves. Others believe weights and levers inside acted like early accelerometers, but the exact details are lost. No original blueprints remain, and only textual descriptions survive. Still, the concept itself shows a level of scientific reasoning far ahead of its time. Zhang Heng didn't just react to the chaos of nature, he sought to understand it, to give it structure and meaning, even when it was invisible to the senses. His invention wasn't just for curiosity either. Earthquakes were a serious threat in ancient China, often tied to omens or seen as signs of imbalance in the empire. Being able to detect them early, or even just record them accurately, had deep social and political meaning. It offered a glimpse of control over something normally chaotic and fearsome. And perhaps that's the real wonder here. In a time before electricity or modern geology, someone could look at the tremors of the earth, not as wrath from the heavens, but as a pattern that could be tracked and measured. But Zhang Heng wasn't alone in blending observation with imagination. Across the world, other ancient engineers were using light in ways we still don't fully understand, bending it, bouncing it, focusing it. From seismographs to mirrors, from bronze balls to beams of sunlight, the line between science and magic in the ancient world was often blurred. And just beyond the shaking earth and the quiet toads of Zhang Heng's design, there stood another marvel, this one rising tall and proud over a harbor built not to listen to the ground, but to guide the lost through fog and storm. It shimmered with lenses, polished stones, and maybe even tricks of optics that have since vanished from history. The next wonder doesn't rumble or fall, it glows, a flame by the sea, a beacon of knowledge, and a mystery in its own right. From Zhang Heng's bronze instrument that could sense the rumblings of distant earthquakes, our path now shifts toward the water, to a structure that didn't listen to the earth, but rather spoke to the sea. Imagine you're sailing through thick coastal mist. The shore is near but hidden. The waves churn louder. You know land lies ahead, but where? Then, piercing the haze, a glow appears. Not the sun, not the moon, but something man made. A fire burning high above the sea. A signal that says, you are not lost. You are nearing home. That flame once belonged to the lighthouse of Alexandria. Built over 2,000 years ago on the small island of Pharos, just off the coast of ancient Alexandria in Egypt, this towering beacon was more than a maritime guide. It was an architectural and technological marvel, one of the legendary seven wonders of the ancient world. And yet, what made it truly strange isn't just its massive scale, it's how it may have used optics and light in ways that still puzzle us today. Construction of the lighthouse began around 280 BCE under the rule of Ptolemy II, and it stood watch for centuries, some say over 100 meters tall, making it one of the tallest man made structures in the ancient world. Its base was square, leading up to an octagonal middle, and then topped with a circular tower. At its crown burned a flame, day and night. But a flame alone isn't enough to guide distant ships. Here's where the mystery deepens. Ancient writers hinted that the lighthouse used polished bronze mirrors, massive, carefully angled plates that could reflect and amplify the firelight, beaming it far out to sea. Some reports even suggest the beam could be seen over 30 miles away, an astonishing distance for the time. How these mirrors worked, how they were constructed, aligned, and maintained remains unknown. No complete diagrams have survived. No original mirrors were recovered, but the claims persist, echoed across centuries and continents. Travelers and historians alike described the light's reach as supernatural, almost too powerful to believe. There's even a legend, likely more poetic than factual, that the lighthouse's beam could set enemy ships on fire using concentrated sunlight, a kind of ancient death ray long before the word laser even existed. While most scholars dismiss this as myth, it adds to the lingering feeling that the lighthouse might have used a technology, or at least an understanding of optics, that went beyond simple fire and stone. What we do know is that the structure itself was a triumph of engineering. Designed by the architect Sostratus of Cinnable, the lighthouse was built to withstand strong winds and earthquakes. Its interior had ramps that allowed animals, possibly donkeys or mules, to carry fuel up to the top. Day after day, night after night, that flame kept burning. And it wasn't just for light. The lighthouse served as a symbol of Alexandria's power and innovation. Alexandria was more than just a coastal city. It was a hub of learning, home to the great library and scholars from across the ancient world. To arrive by sea and see the Pharos was to witness a declaration. Knowledge lives here. The lighthouse stood for over 1,000 years. It weathered time, storms, and at least three major earthquakes. By the 14th century, it had collapsed, leaving only scattered ruins. Today, underwater archaeologists have found large stone blocks submerged near the harbor, which may have once been part of its foundation. And yet, the idea of the lighthouse, not just as a tower, but as a tool of light, precision, and maybe even forgotten science, still flickers in the imagination. Because the truth is, ancient people didn't just build with stone, they built with ideas, with math, observation, and sometimes something that feels close to magic. And as we move from the coasts of Egypt toward the cold forests and fields of Europe, we come across objects far smaller than lighthouses, but no less mysterious, small, hollow, and dodecahedron shaped, with holes whose purpose we still can't quite define. Not machines, not maps, but perhaps something equally revealing, an ancient puzzle left in plain sight. From a beacon that might have used mirrors to guide sailors through darkness, we now move to objects far smaller, quieter, and yet just as perplexing, the kind of artifact you might walk past without even realizing you've encountered a mystery. They fit in the palm of your hand, weigh almost nothing, and are made of simple bronze, but their purpose, centuries later, still leaves experts guessing. These are the Roman dodecahedrons, discovered across a wide stretch of Europe, from Great Britain to Germany, France, Austria, Switzerland, and beyond. These small 12-sided geometric objects have been found in fields, rivers, burial sites, and even Roman military camps. Each one is a perfect dodecahedron, made up of 12 pentagonal faces with a small circular hole in the center of each face. At the tips of the corners, there are small round knobs or spheres, almost like beads soldered into place. But here's where things get strange. In ver- no two are exactly alike in size, thickness, or hole diameter. Some are as small as a golf ball, others are closer to a baseball. The holes vary from one face to another, even on the same object, and they don't follow a consistent pattern. And despite dozens of these objects being discovered, not a single ancient text mentions them. No manuals, no blueprints, no labels, not even graffiti scratching out their use. It's as if the Roman world left us a puzzle with no instructions. So, what were they? Some have guessed they were measuring devices, perhaps used by engineers or soldiers to gauge distance or projectiles. Others think they could have been surveying tools, lining up certain hole sizes to measure angles or heights across terrain. One theory suggests they were used to calibrate water pipes or control irrigation flow, with the holes acting like nozzles. Another popular idea, candle holders. But that theory comes from the fact that some dodecahedrons have been found in graves or temples. Place a small oil lamp or candle inside, the thinking goes, and the glow would flicker through the holes, casting patterned shadows. Some recreations even show how light through the holes might create specific patterns, maybe used in religious rituals or as a kind of sacred calendar tied to the seasons. Others suggest something even more personal, that these were glove makers' tools used to measure finger sizes. If you slip a piece of leather through one of the holes, you can shape or test its fit. But again, the problem is the inconsistency. The holes don't match between dodecahedrons. If it were a tool, why wouldn't the design be more standardized? Then there's the astronomical theory. Some researchers believe that the different hole sizes and angles could have been used to track stars or align with the equinox and solstices. When held at just the right angle toward the sun, a dodecahedron might help predict planting seasons or harvest times. But without written confirmation, it's difficult to prove. It could also be that the purpose changed depending on who used it. Maybe in one region it was ceremonial, in another practical, in yet another symbolic, perhaps even worn as a pendant or carried as a charm. Some dodecahedrons show signs of wear, while others look almost new. A few have been found with coins or pottery, hinting they may have been considered valuable. But there's a final, humbling possibility. Maybe these objects were playthings, toys, game pieces, or simple curiosities passed between hands. Not everything that survives from the past had to be profound. Some things may have simply delighted the eye or the hand and were never meant to be remembered through text. What makes the dodecahedrons so fascinating isn't just their shape, it's that they remind us of the limits of modern understanding, that even after centuries of study, excavation, and theory, there are still artifacts that remain completely silent. No inscription, no hint, just cold metal and a question. And so, they sit in museum drawers and glass cases, small symmetrical enigmas, waiting, waiting beside stone spheres in jungles far away, objects that are massive instead of miniature, carved instead of cast. But just like the dodecahedrons, they carry no clear signature, no origin story, only the soft echo of forgotten hands and forgotten purposes, now buried beneath centuries of silence. From Europe's bronze dodecahedrons, whose purpose still escapes modern minds, we shift our gaze across the Atlantic to the dense tropical jungles and ancient banana plantations of Costa Rica. There, hidden beneath the green canopy, or resting silently in open clearings, are hundreds of mysterious stones, not jagged boulders or chipped carvings, but perfect polished spheres, some as small as a baseball, others as wide as a car. Some weigh a few pounds, others weigh over 15 tons. They are simply called the stone spheres of Costa Rica. But what they are is anything but simple. Made mostly from granodiorite, a hard volcanic rock similar to granite, these spheres have been found scattered throughout the Diquis Delta region in the country's south. Over 300 of them have been catalogued, and though they vary in size and placement, they share one astonishing trait: their roundness. Some are so precise that their deviation from a perfect sphere is measured in millimeters, an achievement that still impresses modern sculptors today. Yet these spheres were created without metal tools, no chisels, no iron picks. The culture that made them, known as the Dequis people, had no written language, no wheels, and no complex machinery. Archaeologists believe they likely used stone hammers and abrasive sand, slowly shaping and smoothing over time. But with no surviving tools, no in progress spheres, and no detailed instructions left behind, the actual process remains largely speculative. And then there's the bigger mystery: why? What purpose did these spheres serve? Were they purely decorative? Did they mark something sacred, like burial sites or gathering spots? Were they symbols of power, ownership, or status? Some believe they were aligned astronomically, placed to track the sun, stars, or seasonal cycles. Others propose they were meant to represent the sun itself, or embody perfection, balance, or unity in a culture we no longer fully understand. Many of the spheres were discovered when the United Fruit Company began clearing land in the 1930s to plant bananas. Workers would stumble upon them, buried beneath layers of sediment, often grouped in clusters, sometimes forming lines, triangles, or geometric patterns. In a few cases, they were found on top of artificial mounds or platforms, suggesting intentional placement. Yet, with no accompanying buildings, altars, or inscriptions, it's difficult to determine if their position held spiritual or practical meaning. Over time, some of the stones were rolled away, broken apart, or even dynamited in search of supposed gold hidden inside. A rumor with no basis but devastating consequences. Others were taken as decorative trophies and now rest in front yards, hotel lobbies, or government buildings far from where they were unearthed. Many have been displaced, robbing researchers of vital clues about their original arrangement. What we do know is that the spheres were likely crafted between 500 and 1500 AD, long before the Spanish arrived. And unlike many other pre Columbian civilizations that left behind vast stone temples, pyramids, or engraved stelae, the Dequicase culture left us this silence, stone, and symmetry. For decades, theories have stretched from the scholarly to the strange. Some believe the spheres may have been territorial markers, denoting clan lands or trade zones. Others think they held cosmic significance, echoing a worldview where circles, cycles, and balance played a vital role. And of course, there are fringe ideas that they were made by Atlanteans, extraterrestrials, or survivors of a forgotten civilization that once mastered geometric perfection before vanishing into myth. But the real fascination may not be in the fantastical. It may lie in what these spheres represent about human persistence. Imagine the patience required to carve a rock the size of a person into a flawless ball, using only other rocks. No power tools, no shortcuts, just hands, repetition, and a vision. Whether the goal was spiritual, ceremonial, or artistic, it speaks to a kind of devotion that transcends modern understanding. And so, these ancient stones continue to sit, unmoving yet impossible to ignore. Today, some of them have been returned to their original region and preserved as part of the pre Columbian chiefdom settlements with stone spheres of the Dequees, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But many remain scattered, separated, and weathered by time. What they once meant to the people who shaped them remains out of reach, and yet their shape, eternal, unbroken, and endlessly smooth, reminds us that some messages from the past may not be written in words at all. They may simply be felt, standing in the quiet presence of an impossible stone, in a place where geometry and mystery meet. Just as the sun once cast its light across these spheres, perhaps it also glinted off high desert lines, etched in the earth, marks that seem made to be seen from the sky, yet rise from a people who never flew. The sun sets slowly over the wide plains of southern Peru, but from the ground nothing looks unusual. Just miles and miles of flat, sun-baked desert. Pebbles crunch underfoot, dust dances in the heat. At first glance, it feels empty, ancient but plain, and yet from hundreds of feet above, the ground suddenly transforms. Shapes begin to appear. A hummingbird spreads its wings. A monkey coils into a perfect spiral. A giant stretches its arms across the land. These are the Nazca lines, enormous geoglyphs etched directly into the surface of the Nazca Desert. Some stretch more than 1,200 feet across. They cover an area of nearly 200 square miles, and the only way to truly see their full beauty is from the sky. But they were made at least 1,500 years ago, long before flight was even a dream. So, who made them, and how did they make such enormous, precise figures? Animals, plants, geometric patterns, and even strange humanoid shapes without being able to look down from above. The Nazca people, a pre Incan civilization, are believed to have created the lines between 500 BCE and 500 CE. Using simple tools, they removed the top layer of dark pebbles to reveal the lighter soil underneath. No heavy machinery, no advanced surveying equipment, just bare hands, wooden stakes, and string. The dry desert climate helped preserve them, with little rain or wind to wash the lines away over the centuries. What's astonishing is not just the scale, but the precision. Many of the lines run perfectly straight for miles, crisscrossing the desert without drifting even an inch off course. Some form perfect triangles, others trace out spirals, and many depict living creatures, from birds and whales to spiders and lizards, all drawn with symmetry and intention. And yet, from the ground, they're nearly invisible. You'd have to climb a nearby hill or fly overhead to truly grasp what was carved into the earth. Which raises the biggest mystery of all. Why? Some scholars suggest they were ceremonial pathways used in sacred rituals. Others believe the lines were made to honor gods, perhaps those connected to the sky or water. In a region where rain is rare, it's possible the lines served as prayers drawn in the sand, asking for survival in a harsh climate. A few researchers believe they were astronomical markers, tracking the solstices or guiding seasonal farming. Certain lines do align with the sun or the rising of particular stars, suggesting a deeper knowledge of the heavens. And then there are the more unconventional theories that they were alien landing strips, signals to beings in the sky, or that the Nazca people somehow flew, using hot air balloons or other lost technologies to view their work from above. There's no strong evidence for this, but the question lingers: how do you create something only visible from the air without ever being in the air? Even stranger are the non animal shapes. Some figures don't resemble anything found in nature. One, Nicknamed the astronaut, shows a round headed figure with big eyes waving at the sky. Another resembles a giant pair of hands emerging from the desert. What were these meant to represent? Gods? Spirits? Symbols of something we no longer understand? Thousands of lines have been discovered, more than 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 plant and animal figures. And new ones are still being found, hidden beneath the dust or worn by time, revealed by modern drone surveys and satellite images. Despite decades of study, no single theory explains them all. The patterns don't follow a single style or purpose. Some may have marked water sources, others could have told myths or mapped stars. Some might have even been made just to be walked, a kind of sacred journey across the land, with each step tracing an invisible thread. And though we may never fully understand what the Nazca were trying to say, their lines speak loudly in their silence. They remind us that art doesn't need words, that stories can be told in stone, across distances measured not in inches, but in miles. And yet, while the Nazca lines stretch across dry desert plains, beneath the waves of the Pacific, another puzzle waits, one that lies hidden just off the coast of Japan, carved not into sand or soil, but into solid stone under the sea. And yet, while the Nazca lines stretch across dry desert plains, beneath the waves of the Pacific, another puzzle waits, one that lies hidden just off the coast of Japan, carved not into sand or soil, but into solid stone under the sea. In the clear blue waters surrounding the island of Yonaguni, scuba divers in the 1980s stumbled upon something that didn't belong: massive stone formations rising from the seafloor, shaped like terraces, steps, and flat platforms. They weren't scattered at random, they were stacked, aligned, and eerily geometric. What was this submerged labyrinth doing beneath the ocean? The structures stretch over 490 feet long and tower up to 90 feet high from the seabed. Some of the steps appear perfectly flat. Right angles repeat throughout. Vertical walls rise as if chiseled. Sloped corridors form clean intersections. Some passages even look like doorways. It's as if a sunken temple had been carved directly into the bedrock and then drowned by time. Some researchers argue it's a natural formation, just erosion acting on sandstone over thousands of years. After all, wave action and tectonic shifts can fracture rock into neat lines. But critics of the natural theory ask a simple question: if it's just erosion, why do some formations resemble staircases? Why are there carved looking platforms and what seems like an altar? Why do parts of the site look so deliberate, like someone shaped them with tools? Supporters of the man made theory point to the main terrace, a broad, flat area with a dramatic staircase that looks more architectural than geological. Then there's what looks like a ceremonial platform and channels running along the sides, shaped like water conduits or processional paths. Some even believe inscriptions or carvings once marked the walls, though the sea has long worn away the finer details. One of the biggest questions isn't just how it was made, but when. For a structure this large to now be under more than 80 feet of water, it would have had to be built during the last ice age, when sea levels were dramatically lower, possibly over 10,000 years ago. That would place it far before the rise of any known advanced civilization in the region. If humans carved it, they would have needed not only architectural vision, but also the tools and social organization to shape massive stone faces and align them across multiple levels. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has studied the site for decades and argues it is indeed artificial, possibly the remains of an unknown civilization lost to the sea. He claims to have found carvings, post holes, and even what might be roads or walls extending beyond the main monument. Skeptics, however, caution against reading too much into vague shapes in eroded rock, pointing out that the mind often sees patterns where none exist, a phenomenon called pareidolia. Still, divers and archaeologists continue to examine the site. Some have even used sonar scans to map the monument in high detail, revealing its scale in full, a complex series of stepped layers, vertical shafts, and squared off blocks that rise from the ocean floor like the bones of an ancient, forgotten city. Whether carved by human hands or formed by the slow pressure of shifting geology, the Yonaguni Monument stands as a silent sentinel beneath the sea, massive, still, and unresolved. It offers no clear answers, just questions that grow sharper with every dive. And only a few hundred miles away, across Asia's rugged landscapes, another strange sight rises, not from the sea, but from dry ground, where giant stone jars lie scattered across the earth in eerie silence. As the stone monuments of Yonaguni linger quietly beneath the sea, we resurface to another mystery scattered across dry land, a place where giants seem to have once gathered, drinking from jars as large as cattle. That's the eerie impression one might get when walking through the rolling fields of Laos, where thousands of massive stone jars rest, silent, weathered, and abandoned. Stretching across the Xingkuang Plateau, the Plain of Jars is not just one location, but a cluster of over 90 distinct sites. Some fields hold only a few dozen jars, others contain hundreds. In total, archaeologists estimate more than 2,000 jars, each carved from solid stone, dot the landscape like forgotten puzzle pieces. Many weigh several tons, some rise as high as 10 feet, and they weren't placed here randomly. Their arrangement suggests intentionality, even meaning. But what meaning? No one can say for sure. Local legends offer stories to fill the gap. One popular tale says the jars were created by giants to brew and store rice wine after a victorious battle. Another says they held water for travelers crossing the arid land. The truth, however, is buried in both time and soil. When archaeologists first studied the jars in the 1930s, they noticed many were located near cave systems and burial sites. That led to one of the most enduring theories that the jars served a funerary purpose. Perhaps they were used in sky burials, or as part of a ritual to expose the dead to the elements before final burial. Others believe the jars held cremated remains or bones, though no conclusive evidence proves this across all the sites. What makes the mystery deeper is that almost none of the jars have lids. Some suggest they originally had wooden covers that have long since decayed. Others propose that they were left open intentionally, part of a process that involved nature, decay, and spirit. In some jars, archaeologists did find fragments of pottery, beads, and burnt bone, supporting the burial theory. But these finds aren't consistent. For every jar with evidence, there are dozens more that remain completely empty. And then there's the question of how they were made. Each jar was carved from a single block of stone, often sandstone, but also granite and limestone in some cases, without metal tools or even a written language to describe the process. It's unclear how ancient peoples managed to shape such immense vessels with relatively primitive technology. And even more puzzling, how did they transport them across uneven terrain, sometimes miles from the quarries where the stone was sourced? Some jars sit alone in open fields, while others cluster in tight groups near hillsides or slopes. Their placement doesn't follow a strict pattern, but it's also not random. Some researchers have suggested the layout may align with celestial markers or sacred geography, though no conclusive model has emerged. What complicates exploration even further is the shadow of war. During the Vietnam War era, this region of Laos became one of the most heavily bombed places on Earth. Millions of unexploded ordnances, cluster bombs still litter the ground, making archaeological work dangerous and slow. Some jar sites remain off limits even today, encircled by warning signs and the memory of recent conflict. Despite all the uncertainty, one thing is clear: the jars are ancient. Radiocarbon dating of materials found near the jars points to an age of around 2,500 years. That means they predate most major structures in Southeast Asia. And yet, no written records, no inscriptions, no depictions remain to explain them. The people who made them left behind only the jars themselves, massive, mute, and unyielding. Walking through the field, there's a strange stillness. Mist hangs over the grass in the early morning, curling around the jars like breath. Some tilt slightly, their bases sinking into the earth. Others sit cracked but upright, as if waiting for something or someone to return. There's a haunting kind of presence here, not of ghosts, but of memory itself, of a forgotten practice, a lost culture, a vanished belief. And if these massive stone vessels weren't enough to stir the imagination, not far across the region, archaeologists uncovered a set of ancient tablets, clay, inscribed, and potentially older than any known form of writing. As the massive stone jars of Laos sit in eerie silence across the highland fields, we move west, far into the forests and plains of Eastern Europe, where three small pieces of clay may hold one of the most shocking secrets in archaeological history. The place is Tartaria, a quiet village in Romania. The objects? Cracked, baked tablets no bigger than the palm of your hand, and yet they may rewrite everything we thought we knew about the birth of writing. In 1961, archaeologist Nikolai Vlasa was excavating a Neolithic site in the area when he uncovered a burial pit. Alongside human bones, figurines, and ceremonial items lay three unassuming tablets, etched with curious markings. At first glance, they looked like symbolic decorations, but a closer look revealed something more deliberate. Rows of signs, some straight, others curved, intersected by dots and wedges. Many of these shapes echoed characters found in early Sumerian writing, and that's what sparked a mystery. Because if these tablets were authentic and as old as the surrounding artifacts suggested, they would date back to around 5500 BCE, nearly 1,000 years before the earliest known examples of cuneiform in Mesopotamia. That would make the Tartaria tablets the oldest known form of written communication ever discovered. But this wasn't a grand library carved into stone walls. These were small, handheld tablets, and only three of them, two rectangular and one round. Some signs appear repeated, like a system was in place. Others resemble pictograms, like a tree, a comb, a gate, or a fish. The language, if it even is one, remains completely undeciphered. There is no Rosetta Stone to guide the way, no accompanying translation, just clay, symbols, and silence. The tablets were found in association with the Vinca culture, a Neolithic civilization that flourished in the Balkans between 5700 and 4500 BCE. The Vinca people left behind thousands of ceramic figurines and artifacts, many adorned with abstract symbols. Some researchers believe these were just artistic motifs. Others argue they were part of a proto-writing system used to record ideas, trade, rituals, or genealogy. If so, that means writing didn't originate in a single place, but may have emerged independently in different regions. The debate has raged for decades. Some scholars dismiss the Tartaria tablets entirely, suggesting the symbols were decorative, not linguistic. Others point out that similar signs have been found across Vinci sites in Serbia, Hungary, and Bulgaria, hinting at a broader, forgotten system of communication. It raises a haunting question: could there have been a civilization in old Europe with symbolic knowledge and record keeping before Mesopotamia even built its first city walls? Fueling the controversy is the way the tablets were fired. They appear to have been baked, either intentionally or by chance, preserving them through millennia. However, some skeptics argue that the context of the find, inside a ritual burial pit, makes it hard to determine whether the tablets were older than the pit itself or added later. The lack of carbon dating on the tablets directly has left their timeline open to question. But other evidence in the region keeps nudging the timeline further back. Ceramic pieces with nearly identical symbols have been found across hundreds of sites in southeastern Europe, dating from the same period. These weren't isolated doodles, they were patterns, systems repeated by different hands in different places. Whether it was proto writing or simply a symbolic language lost to time, the consistency is hard to ignore. And there's something deeply human about it: the urge to mark clay with meaning, to create symbols that say, "This is mine," or "This is sacred," or "This is who we are." Even if we can't read them, the intention whispers through. Someone once sat beside a fire in a Neolithic home, etched those lines with care, and hoped that message would endure. As with many ancient puzzles, we may never know exactly what the Tartaria tablets say. They're like fragments of a forgotten book, words from a vanished world with no remaining voices. But they linger, pressed into clay, staring back at us with the quiet insistence that civilization may have begun, not in one cradle, but in many, and much earlier than we dared to believe. From this cryptic alphabet buried in Romanian soil, the trail of mysterious symbols continues, leading us next to a disc stamped with characters so strange and unique, not a single one has ever been matched to another language on Earth. From ancient tablets pressed in clay to preserve a message we still cannot read, we now step into the island heat of Crete, where another mysterious relic waits, not carved, not etched, but stamped with a deliberate rhythm that speaks of a different kind of mind at work. A mind that saw language not as lines or scratches, but as symbols pressed into soft clay, like a printer long before its time. The Phaistos disk was discovered in 1908 inside the ruins of the Minoan Palace at Phaistos on the southern side of Crete. Nestled in a basement room, the disk lay buried in ash, untouched for thousands of years. It's a flat, round piece of fired clay, about 6 inches across, with symbols pressed into both sides in a spiral pattern that winds toward the center, like the grooves of an ancient record. But what truly sets the disk apart is not its shape, it's the language. 71 unique symbols appear across the surface, many of them repeated. There's a flower, a fish, an arrow, a helmet, a bird, a man in a headdress. Each one was made by pressing small stamps into the soft clay, creating an early form of movable type centuries before Gutenberg's press. No other artifact from the ancient world shares this exact writing system. Not on stone, not on walls, not even elsewhere on Crete. The symbols are isolated in time. They don't resemble linear A or linear B, the Minoan and Mycenaean scripts found elsewhere on the island. And while those systems remain only partially understood, scholars at least know what they were used for. The Phaistos disk, by contrast, is entirely alone. Its spiral layout is unusual, too. Most ancient scripts were written in straight lines, left to right, right to left, or top to bottom. But the disk seems to start at the outer edge and move inward, like someone was winding a story inward, hiding its meaning deep in the center. Some believe it's a hymn or prayer. Others think it's a calendar, a game board, or even a record of military commands. But without another example of the same writing system, there's no way to confirm any of it. Every theory hangs on guesswork. What's even stranger is the precision of the stamps. Each symbol is perfectly consistent, as if made from molds. That would mean the people who created the disc had a full set of individual stamps for each symbol, almost like an early alphabet in the form of stamps instead of letters. And that would make the Phaistos disc not just an ancient message, but possibly one of the first examples of mass producible written text. Yet only one copy has ever been found. The location where it was discovered suggests it wasn't discarded or lost. It was stored, hidden perhaps in a place where important items were kept. Burnt debris around the site suggests the palace was destroyed in a fire, and somehow the disk survived that destruction, preserved by the very disaster that consumed the world around it. Its symbols remain stubbornly silent. Every attempt to decode it has hit a wall. Some linguists have tried to match it to known Mediterranean languages, using frequency analysis or comparing repeated symbol clusters. But without a bilingual reference like the Rosetta Stone, all these attempts are speculative. Others have taken creative paths, linking the images to astrology, music, or myth. None of it has held up under scrutiny. But the disk's very existence still whispers of something remarkable. Someone long ago had the idea not just to carve words, but to standardize them, create stamps, press them in order, and wind them into a message meant to last. Not just to say something, but to make sure it was said exactly the same way every time. In a world where handwriting varied wildly, the Phaistos disc shows startling control and intent, a message repeated perfectly and preserved. Even if we never crack its code, the object itself pushes against the boundaries of what we thought early civilizations could do. It offers a glimpse into a forgotten innovation, one that didn't spread or survive, but still made its mark. And this spiral of symbols isn't the only mystery Crete left behind. Not far from where the disk was found, stories of labyrinths and lost kings linger in ruins, while further across the ancient world, other strange artifacts emerge. Some were found at the bottom of oceans, and others in caves where no tool marks explain their creation. Deep in the heart of western Turkey, tucked within the rocky folds of the Karaboran Peninsula, there's a quiet cave that holds a puzzle almost no one talks about. It's not grand or massive like some of the other ancient sites scattered across the region, but inside its dark interior, carved into the rock walls, are markings that might rewrite everything we think we know about the origins of writing. The Karaburun cave inscriptions, named after the remote peninsula where they were found, are made up of a series of deeply etched symbols. These aren't random scratches from animals or the idle doodles of bored shepherds. They are deliberate, organized, and strangely consistent. Some resemble stick like figures, others form geometric shapes. A few are so unique that nothing quite like them appears in any known script. They don't match Hittite, Greek, or even Sumerian, the system often credited as the world's first true written language. And that's what makes them so unsettling. If these cave symbols were carved before the rise of Sumer, which flourished around 3100 BCE, then they might represent an even earlier form of communication, possibly the work of a civilization lost entirely to time. That suggestion alone has stirred quiet debate among scholars who've studied them, though no official consensus has been reached. Most mainstream archaeologists approach the site with caution, citing the lack of datable material around the inscriptions. But others, especially independent researchers and epigraphers, see something far more radical. What's particularly strange is the uniformity of the symbols. They're not scattered randomly like graffiti or spread out in chaotic bursts. They follow a loose rhythm, a kind of pacing, almost as if whoever carved them was following a mental system, a structure for how thoughts were recorded. The grooves are clean, deep, and intentionally placed, often arranged in rows that suggest sentence like constructions. If they are a language, then they come from a world that used writing in a way we no longer understand. And if they are not a language, what are they? Some theorists believe they may be a form of sacred symbolism, something closer to proto writing than actual text. That is, a set of symbols used to represent ideas, not words. Similar protoscripts have been proposed in other parts of the world, like the Vinci symbols in southeastern Europe, or the Jiahu markings in China. But the Karaburun signs don't match those either. They exist in a strange space, isolated, unexplained, and almost defiantly obscure. The cave itself offers little help. It's shallow, with no evidence of long term habitation. There are no pottery shards, no bones, no fire pits, just the stone, the silence, and the carvings. The atmosphere is dry and still, which helped preserve the symbols, but it also robs researchers of the usual clues. There's no cultural context to ground the findings, just bare walls and deep lines, as if someone wanted to be remembered but left nothing else behind. Curiously, the site hasn't been widely publicized. Compared to more famous inscriptions, like the petroglyphs in the American Southwest or the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, Karaburun sits in relative obscurity. But perhaps that's part of what keeps its mystery intact. The less people expect to find, the more it reveals. Some locals claim that older generations knew about the cave and avoided it. There were whispers that it was cursed, or sacred, or that strange lights once glowed inside on moonless nights. These are stories passed down quietly, the kind told with lowered voices and wary eyes. Whether rooted in fact or folklore, they echo a long tradition where the unknown becomes a thing of power. One of the most compelling possibilities is that the Karaburun symbols represent a forgotten experiment in communication, something that came before standardized writing systems, but still aimed to record, express, or preserve. And if that's true, it would mean that the urge to write, to capture thought in something permanent, was older and more widespread than we ever imagined. That somewhere along the Aegean coast, before cities rose and empires formed, someone picked up a tool and decided to leave a message. What that message says is still anyone's guess, but its presence etched in rock in a silent cave presses against the edges of history like a voice we've just begun to hear. And as the trail of mysterious scripts continues through distant ruins and lost artifacts, we find that these symbols aren't isolated at all. They are part of a growing chorus of anomalies that quietly ask the same question: how much have we really forgotten? Just as these markings echo from the depths of stone, other relics emerge from the depths of the sea, inscribed on materials not native to the land where they were found. Deep in the vast golden emptiness of the Sahara Desert, where endless dunes shimmer like waves beneath a relentless sun, there lies a region called the Fezzan. It's one of the most remote and inhospitable parts of Libya, a place so dry that anything left undisturbed for centuries can remain preserved almost perfectly. And tucked into this desolate landscape is the Ubari Oasis, a small cluster of palm ringed lakes that feel more like a mirage than a real location. But beyond its picturesque surface lies one of the desert's most confounding secrets: mummies. Not Egyptian mummies in grand pyramids or royal tombs. These were discovered in humble caves, hidden in the rocks near the oasis, far from any ancient city or temple. And what truly startled the archaeologists who first examined them wasn't just how well they were preserved, but who they seemed to be. The mummies of Ubari, believed to be over 5,000 years old, show features that don't align with the local populations of ancient North Africa. High cheekbones, narrow skulls, lighter complexions, traits more often associated with populations of the Mediterranean or even parts of Europe. And that's where the mystery deepens, because the Sahara wasn't always a desert. Thousands of years ago, the region was lush and green, lakes and rivers threaded through grasslands teeming with animals, known as the African Humid Period. This time saw human settlement spread across areas we now consider barren. Rock art in nearby Tassili Najer shows hunters, cattle herders, and entire communities thriving in what was then a green world. But while those images give glimpses of life, the Uberan mummies seem to suggest that people were not just surviving here, they were traveling and possibly migrating from distant lands. Their burial style is another anomaly. They were found wrapped carefully in layers of cloth, often positioned with clear intention, arms folded, bodies aligned, sometimes with beads or simple jewelry nearby. These aren't the spontaneous remains of travelers who perished in the desert. These are people who were laid to rest with care and ritual. It hints at a culture with beliefs about death and perhaps a reverence for the afterlife. And then there's the matter of how they ended up so far from any known civilization. No written records mention these people, no major ruins mark their presence, and yet they were here, deep in the Sahara, in an oasis only accessible by treacherous routes. Some archaeologists believe they may have been part of a forgotten migratory group, possibly linked to early Mediterranean cultures that ventured inland during the wet periods, following rivers that have since vanished beneath the sand. Others suggest a connection to the mysterious Garamantis civilization, which thrived in the Fezzan region much later. The Garamantis built underground tunnels to access water and developed trade routes across the Sahara, but the timeline doesn't quite match. The Ubari mummies are much older, predating the rise of the Garamantas by thousands of years. Even the DNA studies conducted on the remains have sparked debate. Some preliminary results hinted at mixed ancestry, part North African, part Eurasian, but the sample sizes were small and the findings far from definitive. It raised more questions than answers. Were these people travelers who settled temporarily, a lost tribe, or evidence of ancient contact between distant civilizations long before it was thought possible? Adding another layer to the mystery, the mummies seem to disappear from history almost as quickly as they appear. No other large burial sites have been found nearby. No massive settlements, no grand cities, just these isolated remains, tucked in caves as if trying to stay hidden. And when the Sahara began to dry out again, they were sealed in by sand, preserved by time and climate until rediscovered thousands of years later. Their silence is deafening, unlike the mummies of Egypt, who rest beneath inscriptions and hieroglyphs. The Ubari dead left no message, no scrolls, no tomb carvings, only their faces, frozen in time, staring out from linen wrappings under desert rock. And just as these buried secrets emerge from the dunes, other mysteries lie in wait, etched into stone, left behind by unknown hands, in languages the world has never learned to read. Far out in the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest continent, a small, windswept island rises from the waves. It's a quiet place, dotted with grass covered hills and black volcanic rock. But what immediately captures the eye and the imagination are the stone giants standing in rows across the land, over 900 of them, towering heads with long noses, heavy brows, and tight lipped expressions. These are the Moai of Easter Island, known to its people as Rapa Nui, each one carved from volcanic rock, each one weighing tons, and somehow each one transported across rough terrain without wheels, beasts of burden, or modern machines. The average moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs over 14 tons. Some are much bigger. The largest ever erected is nearly 33 feet tall and weighs an estimated 82 tons. Even more staggering is an unfinished one still embedded in the quarry. It stretches more than 70 feet and would have weighed over 200 tons had it been completed. But what makes these statues so baffling isn't just their size. It's the fact that they were carved in one part of the island, Rano Raraku, an extinct volcano, and then somehow moved miles away, often uphill or across valleys, and placed onto large stone platforms called ahu. There's no written record left behind to explain how this was done. Oral traditions offer some clues, but nothing definitive. Early theories guessed that the moai were rolled on logs or dragged by large groups of people. But this raised a problem. Rapa Nui is a small island, and its forests are sparse today. If they had cut down all the trees to move the moai, what did that do to the environment, and how long could such a practice have lasted? Modern experiments have tried to test different ideas. Some researchers believe the statues were walked into place, with ropes tied around their heads and hips. Groups on either side could rock them back and forth, pivoting them forward like a fridge being shuffled across a kitchen floor. This method was tested with replicas and even a few actual Mo. It worked, but it required perfect balance, coordination, and likely years of passed down expertise. But transportation is only part of the puzzle. There's also the question of why the Moai were made at all, and why so many. The islanders believed that the Moai represented powerful ancestors. They weren't just statues, they were guardians, watchers. Once erected on their platforms, their backs faced the sea, and their gaze turned inland, watching over the villages and fields. Some even had coral eyes inserted into their sockets, giving them a more lifelike presence. The purpose was spiritual, to protect, to bless the land, to link the living with the dead. Each moai was unique. Some bore hats or top knots, cylindrical red stones called puko. Others were larger or more finely carved. These variations may reflect status, lineage, or clan rivalry. It's possible that the size and placement of a moai signaled a group's prestige, almost like a monument to power. The bigger the statue, the greater the pride. But over time, something shifted. The tradition of carving and raising moai faded. Many were toppled, either by natural events like earthquakes, or perhaps by internal conflict. As resources became scarce and societal stress mounted, the people of Rapa Nui may have turned against the very monuments they once revered. By the time European explorers arrived in the 18th century, many moai were already lying face down in the earth. And yet the quarry remained. Unfinished statues frozen mid creation, tools left behind, some half carved moai still embedded in the mountainside, as if their sculptors had simply walked away. This snapshot of a halted tradition offers a glimpse into a society in transition, moving from a world of stone monuments to something else entirely. Even today, the moai continue to stir debate. Were they tools of social control, expressions of belief, evidence of a once thriving and complex culture that outgrew its environment? Or were they something more, something we still struggle to interpret? As their silent faces continue to endure wind, rain, and time, these statues refuse to give up their full story. They stand not only as engineering marvels, but as stone questions still waiting for answers. And in the next stretch of remote land, across the globe, more unanswered questions lie beneath the desert sun, etched into ground so vast it can only be seen from the sky. Deep in the heart of Texas, near the quiet town of London, not the one across the Atlantic, but a small settlement nestled among hills and fields, something strange was discovered in the 1930s. It wasn't buried treasure, or dinosaur bones, or even ancient cave paintings. It was a hammer, a simple tool, metal head, wooden handle, the kind of thing any blacksmith or carpenter might have used in the 19th century. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about it. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the hammer itself, it was the rock around it. The hammer was encased in a lump of hardened stone, not resting on top, not wedged into a crack, entirely surrounded, as if the rock had formed around it. The couple who found it, Max and Emma Hahn, were out for a walk when they noticed the odd formation. A piece of wood was sticking out of a strange rock. Curious, they brought it home. Years later, their son cracked open the stone with a hammer and chisel, and that's when the full head of the embedded tool was revealed. Smooth metal, cylindrical shape, wooden shaft still visible, the entire head neatly encased in what looked like ancient stone. Soon, claims began to spread. Some suggested that the rock surrounding the hammer was over 100 million years old, based on the surrounding geologic formations. If that was true, how could a man made tool be trapped inside? A hammer forged by humans, inside stone, formed when dinosaurs still walked the earth. It didn't make sense. The idea was too strange to ignore. How could something so modern looking be so ancient? Scientists and skeptics offered several explanations. Some proposed that the hammer wasn't ancient at all, that it had simply fallen into a crack or a soft deposit, and over time, minerals had slowly built up around it, forming what's called a concretion. Concretions can form in decades or even just years under the right conditions. Moisture, sediment, and mineral rich water can create cement like masses that look ancient but aren't. Others weren't convinced. They pointed to the smoothness of the stone, the tight seal around the metal, the absence of tool marks or disturbances in the surrounding material. They argued that this wasn't just a hammer stuck in some mud. It was fossilized, preserved, sealed in geological time. Even more curious was the composition of the hammerhead itself. Tests suggested it was made of 96% iron, 2% chlorine, and 1% sulfur, a combination not typically found in modern steel manufacturing. The metal had not rusted despite being exposed to air and moisture. Some speculated this might suggest unknown ancient techniques or unusual preservation. But not everyone agrees with that analysis. Critics of the mystery note that without proper peer reviewed studies, the tests can't be taken as conclusive. The sample may have been contaminated or simply misread. Others suggest the high purity iron was achievable in the 19th century with blast furnaces, and that the lack of rust might be due to environmental factors or even the protective stone shell itself. Still, the story has found its place in fringe history and alternative archaeology circles. Some claim it's evidence of ancient advanced civilizations lost to time. Others say it's proof of time travel or a remnant from a pre flood world. To mainstream science, those are wild leaps without credible evidence, but to curious minds, the unanswered questions remain tantalizing. Today, the London hammer can be viewed at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, where it's displayed as a possible challenge to conventional timelines. Visitors come from all over to see the strange artifact sealed in stone. Some come with skepticism, others come with wonder, and many leave with more questions than answers. It's not the only artifact to stir up this kind of mystery. Throughout history, strange objects have appeared where they don't seem to belong. Tools in coal seams, coins in ancient strata, figurines in sediment layers. These are known as out of place artifacts, and while many are later debunked or explained, they still feed the imagination. And just as this hammer challenges our assumptions about time, invention, and progress, half a world away, in another desert carved by wind and silence, mysterious shapes were drawn into the earth, not by tools, but by hands. Enormous shapes best seen from the sky, etched into the land with a precision no one has fully explained. In the mines of South Africa, where the rock is unimaginably ancient, dating back nearly 3 billion years, miners have stumbled upon something that doesn't quite belong: small metallic spheres. Some are smooth and perfectly round, others are flattened ovals. But most curiously, many of them have fine grooves etched neatly around their equators, as if something or someone had taken the time to carve them with intention. These objects, known as the Klerksdorp spheres, take their name from the town near where they were discovered, deep within pyrophyllite deposits in the Wonderstone mines. The rock formations in which they were found are so old that they predate complex multicellular life. These aren't fossils. They aren't tools dropped by miners. These spheres were embedded in solid stone in strata dated to be 2.8 to 3 billion years old. At first glance, they appear simple, small objects no larger than a golf ball, most made of a hard metallic substance. Some have hollow centers, others are solid, but the grooves, those are what spark endless debate. Many of the spheres have parallel lines that wrap cleanly around their widest part, almost like a lathe had turned them. It's the kind of precision you'd expect from a factory, not from a lump of metal pulled out of prehistoric rock. This contradiction has led to two competing views, one grounded in geology, the other reaching into mystery. On the scientific side, many geologists argue that the spheres are natural formations, specifically a type of concretion. Over time, minerals like hematite and pyrite can accumulate around a core, such as a grain of sand, slowly building up concentric layers under heat and pressure. In the right conditions, this process can result in nearly perfect spheres. The grooves, they suggest, may be the result of natural lamination, internal crystal growth, or even weathering over eons. But skeptics of that explanation ask how such fine lines could form so evenly without outside influence. And why do some of the spheres feel too precise, too symmetrical to be entirely natural? Their metallic content, often composed of nickel rich pyrophyllite, raises questions about their durability and how they could have survived billions of years intact in such a brittle host rock. And then there's the odd mechanical feel of the objects. Some researchers and fringe theorists point out that several of the spheres spin on their axis when placed on a flat surface inside a sealed glass case. This effect has led to speculation about magnetic properties or even gyroscopic balance. While no peer reviewed studies have confirmed anything beyond curiosity, the idea that these objects might serve some unknown function continues to fuel alternative theories. One such theory posits that the spheres are remnants of a lost civilization that existed before our recorded history even began, possibly millions, if not billions, of years ago. If true, that would upend everything we know about human evolution, technology, and time itself. Others go further, suggesting extraterrestrial origins. Could the Klerksdorp spheres be fragments of ancient machinery, or data storage devices from a forgotten world? Mainstream science remains cautious. Without direct evidence of tooling marks or signs of intelligent modification, most researchers believe the spheres are natural mineral growths, albeit unusually symmetrical ones. But even the natural explanation is fascinating. If these objects are purely geological, they still push the limits of what we understand about how minerals organize themselves under ancient Earth conditions. Regardless of their true origin, the Klerksdorp spheres remain locked in debate. They don't give up their secrets easily. They sit in glass cabinets in museums and in dusty corners of collections, drawing glances and questions in equal measure. But the wonder doesn't stop at metal spheres, because just as these objects raise questions about ancient intelligence or natural design, another relic lies buried in a different kind of mystery, etched not in stone, but in crystal, not formed by pressure, but carved with precision into the shape of a human skull. What if everything we've unearthed so far, every shard of pottery, every etched stone, every glinting artifact, wasn't meant to confuse us, but to call us back to a time when the earth whispered secrets through symbols and stone, when knowledge wasn't lost, but layered, not destroyed, but quietly waiting. Maybe these strange discoveries, the crystal skulls, the iron columns, the underwater temples, and perfectly carved spheres, aren't puzzles from a vanished world. Maybe they're mirrors, silent, patient mirrors, reflecting something we've forgotten about ourselves. We often assume we're the peak of understanding, the top of the timeline, the ones who know. But what if we're the ones who forgot? Forgot the language of stars and stone, forgot how to feel the ground for its vibrations, forgot how to listen without speaking, how to look without labeling. What if ancient people didn't leave behind mysteries, but messages? Messages etched in clay, carved in silence, hidden in plain sight, not for amusement, not for confusion, but for remembrance. Maybe the past isn't lost. Maybe we just stopped listening. So as you drift into sleep tonight, carry with you this quiet invitation to remain curious, to leave space for wonder, to entertain the impossible, if only for a moment. And before you close your eyes completely, share your thoughts in the comments. Which artifact stirred your imagination the most? Which one made you pause? Was it the underwater monument, shaped like a forgotten city? The glider shaped bird buried beneath Egyptian dust? Or perhaps the polished spheres older than complex life? I'd love to hear what lingers in your mind. If these nighttime explorations fill you with that same spark, the same quiet awe, tap the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. There's still so much left to uncover, so many questions that haven't yet found their voice. And above all, never forget the world is far stranger, far older, and far more wondrous than we ever dared believe. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries are the ones that remind us how little we truly know. Sweet dreams, fellow explorer.